Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the new generation took over the WWF. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Imagine Shawn Michaels in your home. Imagine Bret Hart at your dinner table. It's unbelievable and only in the World Wrestling Federation.
Joe Gianetti.
Oh, Bertha, please don't ever stop blowing me kisses.
My God. I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. But first, Joe, I hear you've got some email action going on over there. What do you have?
I do. We got an email from a fan, Jeff from Philadelphia, a regular listener. He has contacted us through Instagram a couple times, and he sent us an email at wrasslinraw@gmail.com. So if anybody's interested in reaching out to us, you can do so by messaging us on Instagram or emailing us at wrasslinraw@gmail.com. So, Jeff has a question. It's about Yokozuna. It seems to be about our critique of Yokozuna. Jeff says, "You asshole sons of bitches." just kidding. Just kidding. He didn't say that. He says,
"That's a shame.
I love listening to the podcast. I notice you guys don't have many good things to say about Yokozuna, but the rest of the industry seems to have nothing but good things to say about the big man. I personally think he's one of the greatest big men of all time. What's the deal? Why do you guys hate on him so much?" Ryan, you want to take that first?
Sure. I'll give my 2 cents on it. I mean, obviously, this is just coming from me. I can't speak for you two, but as far as it goes with Yoko, if you go back and watch his matches as the great Kokona, he was an absolutely amazing athlete for his size. The giant difference, and I'm highlighting the word giant here, is when he wrestled then, he was like 350 pounds and was an amazing big guy at 350 pounds. He moved like a 200-pounder. The difference is that isn't the Yoko we are dealing with here. Our show, we're taking Raw week by week. And at the moment we pick up, Yokozuna is 650 pounds. He's 300 pounds heavier than he was back when he was an amazing athlete. And sadly, it shows. I know a lot of people in the industry have a lot of great things to say about him, and it's warranted. But if you look at Yokozuna in 93, 94, 95 time period, he looks like an absolute heart attack waiting to happen in the ring. Yeah. He's slow, he's sweating, and he just is a shell of his former self. It's just an unfortunate thing that the time that we are dealing with is Yoko in his decline. It would be like if we were, I love The Undertaker, but if we were covering Raw right now, what would we have to say about the Undertaker-Goldberg match? It was fucking shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, that's really all I could say is we could only deal with the time frame we're given here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I can't argue with any of that. The only things that I would tack on is in the same spirit of we can only work with what we're given. I can go and listen to all the shoot interviews that I want talking about how great Yokozuna was, but at the same time, I have just a back of my head feeling that these people are talking whimsically about those times when he was only 350. And yes, whenever they point out certain things like how fast he was getting up, because, the insiders in the business talk about how important it is for once a heel is down to get back up to be able to keep setting up the rally of the babyface. And if you're watching these matches with Yokozuna, yes, for somebody that is 650 fucking pounds, he can get back on his feet very quickly. It's astonishing how fast he can get back up to his feet. However, that doesn't change the fact that whenever you see these matches, it's almost like, and this is more of an insult to Yokozuna than I want it to be, but it's almost like he's Atom Bomb. He stays in the center of the ring. He can't move. Whenever he does move, it's to do a big bump to the outside and then stand there for a while. The way that his matches get paced, you can tell that these matches are set up in order to give him as much breathing room as possible. And unfortunately, that just doesn't stack up to an exciting match most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are exceptions here and there, but I really hate to say it. I think that the good opinions that people have of Yokozuna are deserved, but I think that they are talking about a Yokozuna that us here in Wrasslin Raw were never able to see. Because that's, what did you say, like 3 years ago? I mean,
yeah.
if we're in 1993 starting this up like we did, he's already past his prime. I hate to say it that way, but it's kind of the fact of the matter.
He's already at 600 pounds at that point.
Yeah. I'm not trying to shit talk a legitimate health concern here, because the guy did have legitimate health issues, and I mean, nobody comes right out and says it, but probably a food addiction and, that kind of thing. And I'm not denigrating that at all. It's just, obviously, he got to the point he was at in 1993, 94, 95, because at a point before that, he was excellent. And I don't argue that in the least bit. It's just, again, there's only so much we can talk about when he stands in the middle of the ring and sweats.
Well, and I do wonder, too, like, listening to the shoot interviews, everyone seems to love the guy. He seemed to be a phenomenal human being.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that plays into it, too. If this guy was a friend of yours and was a great guy and you loved being around him, it's kind of tough to shit talk him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys that nobody has anything bad to say about him.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with guys like Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Razor Ramon, Kevin Nash. Everybody talks shit on those guys, but never on Yokozuna. So I think, they're probably just, I guess, pretty biased because he's, such a nice guy that they loved to have in the locker room. But Bartlett, you pointed out the food addiction, and it seems like people like Bruce Pritchard and those guys like sort of take credit for, we tried to help. We sent him to Duke University, to the program to lose weight. But then you enabled it by allowing him to go back on TV when he gained weight.
Yeah.
If you sent him there, he came back and gained weight, you should not have put him in the ring.
Not just put him in the ring, you gave him a belt immediately.
Yeah.
And honestly, played off him eating a bowl of fucking rice, too,
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to sit here and tell me how the WWF was worried about his weight, but then when he comes back, all you do is make fun about how much he eats, I mean, come the fuck on.
And going way back, they killed his run with the whole Hulk Hogan shit in WrestleMania 9.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They killed it. So, I don't know. I think that WWF is obviously a little bit to blame here for the issues that Yokozuna had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. All in all, I mean, and I think I can speak for the three of us on this one, it is a tragic fucking story that happened to, by all accounts, one of the nicest, most honest, most humble people to ever grace the squared circle. But that doesn't change the fact that he's still putting it out there in front of us. The WWF is still putting it out there in front of us. And when you put an obviously unhealthy person out in the public eye, there's going to be criticism. And that's all this is. This isn't a reflection of the man. This is a reflection of the wrestler, if that distinction can be made, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jeff, I hope that adequately addressed your question. I don't know about you guys, but I love answering fan questions. So anybody else out there, send them in. We can do this anytime.
Keep them coming, for sure.
That being said, let's get to it. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on October 23rd, 1995. This Raw was recorded at the Keystone Center in Brandon, Manitoba, Canada, and features Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
Let's get into it. Last night at In Your House, there was some shit as Diesel and Bret Hart went at it. And overlapping all of this video flashback is some really inappropriate elevator music. What a terrible, terrible way to set the tone for that. Let's not forget that tonight here on Raw, we're going to have the women's title match between Alundra, Blayze, and Bertha Faye. And finally, a mass of humanity in the ring as we have a 20-man battle royale to determine the number one contender for the Intercontinental Championship. Later on, we'll also have updates on the medical condition of Shawn Michaels. And then we go into our Nitro Light intro. This time, though, the theme music for Nitro Light is significantly harder. A lot more fitting for what's going on there visually on the screen. I was happy to hear that.
And, you know, that really kind of made me think of something. The last music that they've been using up until this intro, it's reminded me of like when a show would do a late night show. Yeah. And they would kind of like tone down the music and everything was just a little bit quieter. And you know what I mean? That's what it felt like.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. This is Vince McMahon with Miles Davis.
Up late with WWF.
It seems like they're experimenting a little bit with a few different intros.
Yeah. Just speaking for myself, I think they hit on the correct formula with this harder music because, let's face it, the chugging blues riff wasn't doing it for me as far as getting me excited for this. But, speaking of things that don't get me excited, there's a whole bunch of humanity in the ring now, and then Marty Gianetti comes on down. And then Sid does come down. That was a little more enticing.
Do you guys think Marty had enough tassels on his ring gear?
Oh, Jesus.
No, not at all. What's great about Marty is that if you added a couple more spangly bits to his belt, you could use him as a spinner bait going bass fishing. And, of course, Psycho Sid rounds this out. We're going to have Sid with some pre-recorded comments. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear or understand most of what he was saying because he was whispering and his entrance music was still being blasted over it. So while I would love to comment on Sid's promos, they are generally entertaining, if not insane. I can't. Marty Gianetti then gets on screen and cuts a promo for us. He did slur a word or two. That was the only convincing thing about it. Then Isaac Yankim comes down the entryway to get into the ring. He's got zero entrance gear on, and that also means that he has zero paraphernalia to indicate that he's a dentist. And with that in mind, Glenn Jacobs looks great when he's not wearing a smock and magnifying glasses. It was just cool to see a big, tough-looking motherfucker come down to the ring that didn't have to look through those ridiculous magnifying aperture things that he usually wears. Before we get to the Battle Royale, I wanted to ask you guys, Joe, let's start with you first. Did you have any comments on these brief promos that we got and the way that we kicked this episode off?
Not really. I mean, I have some stuff to say about Marty Gianetti in particular, but I'll save it. I'll save it for my comments about the match.
Yeah, I don't have much either. Sid, like you said, was very difficult to even hear what was being said, so I don't have much to comment on that. And Marty Gianetti, I mean, all I could think of was 80s overload, every word that came out of his mouth. So, not much.
All right. Well, let's go now then to our first match of the night. A 20-man battle royale. And this ends with Owen Hart defeating Aldo Montoya, Bam Bam Bigelow, Barry Horowitz, Bob Holly, Duke the Dumpster Droese, Make a Difference Fatu, Hakushi, Henry O. Godwin, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Isaac Yankim DDS, Jean-Pierre Lafitte, King Kong Bundy, Marty Gianetti, Rad Radford, Savio Vega, Sid, Skip, and the 1-2-3 Kid in 20 minutes and 7 seconds. So just because of the sheer length of this match and my personal inability to keep up with so much shit going on in the ring, I kind of just limited this to highlight notes. We can absolutely get more in-depth on this if you guys want to, but just as a warning, this is going to be relatively short considering what we're working with. I was quite happy to see King Kong Bundy get tossed out in the first 15 seconds, the first elimination.
5 seconds.
Yeah. Barry Horowitz is the person that eliminated Skip, of course. The crowd loved it. Even Vince went off with, Horowitz wins! Horowitz wins! before breaking for commercial. I had to note, it's amazing that Duke the Dumpster Droese is still here and still exists. His performance in this 20-man Battle Royale was absolutely mediocre.
On par.
I also realized during this that Sid versus Marty Gianetti would probably be one of the worst matches ever booked. We got a brief taste of that kind of action, and it wasn't good. It surprised the hell out of me how over Marty Gianetti was with this crowd towards the end of this match. I couldn't believe it, how much crowd noise he was getting. Savio Vega's Insecurity to Owen Hart looked great. That's a match I would absolutely love to see, so much so, in fact, that I had to look it up, and we won't get to see Savio Vega versus Owen Hart until SummerSlam 96, unfortunately. Finally, it gets down to Owen Hart and Marty Gianetti. I never thought that I would be saying that. I loved Owen hanging onto the ropes as Gianetti was wailing on him. That was a great little sequence. Not a whole lot of substance to it, but just as far as being visually impressive, it was very entertaining, I thought. The interference of the British Bulldog at the end was surprising and somewhat pointless, but that does soften Gianetti up enough for Owen to put him over the top rope, making Owen Hart the winner and new #1 contender for the Intercontinental Championship. As a side note, I was coming day and night at how fucking loud and bass-heavy Owen Hart's high-energy music was bumping on that house PA system for his victory. It's like they cranked it up to 11 for that. Ryan, what did you think of the Battle Royale here?
As it starts out, we see a bunch of faces in the ring that we have not seen in a long time. King Kong Bundy, Duke the Dumpster, even Bam Bam. You know, we haven't seen him in a while either, ever since he lost the Roman candles.
Yeah.
And Sid's another guy we haven't really seen in a while. And they're all in this match. And I've mentioned before in our podcast that Royal Rumble matches are probably my least favorite matches in existence. The reason why is it's just impossible to pay attention at the beginning. When there's 20 guys in the ring, it's just absolute craziness, and you can't focus on any one person. If you try to, their interaction with another guy only lasts 5 seconds. So it's very, very difficult to pay attention to any good wrestling in a Royal Rumble match, and they always just come off as very boring to me as I just kind of stare at the screen, you know, wondering like, when are we going to finally get down to, 3 or 4 wrestlers and it actually be entertaining? And this, followed that same formula. It wasn't entertaining until we're down to Owen and Gianetti, and the best part, you said, Owen Hart holding onto the ropes and just the way he's hamming it up there as Gianetti tries to beat on him. That was the highlight of that match to me, was Owen Hart, which shouldn't come as any surprise. Owen Hart is a legend. So, yeah, at the end of this match, though, Gianetti looked gassed. Really, really gassed.
Yeah.
I mean, that final series when right before Owen tossed him out, I thought he was just going to collapse in the middle of the ring, how slow he was moving. Yeah, Royal Rumble matches are really not my favorite, and this followed that.
I actually enjoyed this Battle Royal quite a bit. Not necessarily the entire Battle Royal, but definitely the end, towards the end, like the final 4. I typically do not like, now, Ryan, you said Royal Rumble. I usually do not like Battle Royals because I don't like when all the guys are just in there to start it. I prefer the Royal Rumble when they come in one at a time, but whatever. Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. And one of the things that I disliked about it was just Marty Gianetti getting featured so much these last few weeks because, and Bartlett, you mentioned, the crowd was behind him a little bit for sure, but like, it pisses me off because didn't this guy screw up and get fired?
Yeah.
Or walk out or whatever? Like, you'd think that he would need to earn that spot back.
Yep.
But we could give this spot to Savio Vega or Skip or anybody.
Barry Horowitz.
Yeah. Anybody that's like trying to earn a spot and actually earning it. So that bothered me. But at the beginning of this, I sort of thought, okay, who am I pulling for and who do I think is going to win? Did that cross your minds at all?
Sure.
Not at all, actually. I had no idea what to think going into this.
So at the beginning, I was thinking, okay, I'm polling for either Helmsley or Owen Hart to win this because I thought they're going to go against Razor Ramon. So I figured, okay, they're going to go with a heel. So I was polling for either Helmsley or Owen Hart. I thought maybe they were going to have Sid win it. So I was very pleased to see Owen Hart win. I think that this has probably been the most satisfied I've ever been with an outcome of a match in a long time. Like, I like that Owen is getting put into the Intercontinental title picture. I've been wanting that for a long time, and now it's happening. It's kind of disappointing that it's next week. I kind of hope it carries into Survivor Series. But yeah, I love that Owen won, and I'm glad that he's in that picture now.
For me, the main thing is, and I agree, the last few minutes of the match were entertaining, and I thought how it ended was good. It's just that for me, it's 18 minutes of boredom to get to that point.
Yeah.
You know, but that's just me.
Yeah, and it's an absolutely fair point. The biggest thing that I noticed about this that turned me off, and I think I fall somewhere in between the two of you as far as battle royales go. I lean more towards Joe in that I prefer a Royal Rumble scenario because of the slow trickle of entrants. But at the same time, I do fall on Ryan's side with the start of this, with just everybody in the ring is just, it's impossible to keep track of what's going on. And that brings
Especially when they go to commercial four times and you miss half the elimination.
Every time you come back, there's half the amount of people in the ring.
Yeah.
And that, though, brings me to my biggest critique of this, which is in an effort to try to give some kind of intelligent opinion on this, I tried to pay attention as close as possible to the little interactions that I thought were interesting or the pairings between two individuals that I thought were interesting. And it ended up just setting the tone for the rest of this episode. There was a lot of really lame, mistimed spot calling and just... There was a point at which the floor camera caught Make a Difference Fatu leaning on somebody in the corner, and it seemed like they were just having a fucking conversation and killing time. So it seems like this is one of those events where it's best to have a broad view and not pay attention too much until the end, because when you start paying attention, you're going to see 20 guys in a fucking ring not really knowing what to do with each other. They're just trying to kill time until it's their spot to get out. That was probably the single biggest standout thing for me, was just how many, just like they might as well have been reading the fucking newspaper together. And, you know, it was too many little things like that. But one thing I did want to add, though, Joe, fantastic point on Marty Gianetti. I did not think of it that way. I did think that I was happy to see Owen Hart in this position, but yeah, so many other people could have filled in that Gianetti spot and it would have been so much better. Or at least they would have actually deserved it. All right, let's move it along here to something that I was genuinely excited about. It's an ad for the WrestleMania arcade game, and that game looked fucking fantastic.
Yeah, it did.
Some of the shit going on that screen, it was almost like it was a roided up version of a traditional wrestling video game where you had finishers, but they had like, I don't even know what to compare it to. You know how like an NBA Jam back in the day, if you did it right, your ball would catch fire and you would set fire.
He's on fire!
Yeah, exactly.
So I had the Super Nintendo version of this game.
How was it?
And it was not like that. They must have had different features on the different systems.
Oh, well, that pisses me off.
Well, if they called it arcade, so what happens a lot of times with arcade ports to consoles is especially the sound effects get really toned down. You don't end up with nearly the sound effects the arcade has. And graphic-wise, a home console just is not going to have the power of a arcade system, so they end up having to tone back on a lot of the extra special effects and stuff as well.
Yeah. It was a good game, though. I enjoyed it.
I still, depending on what the going rate is for that, I might still try to pick it up. I'm in the habit of collecting old school wrestling games. I did note here that they said that it was available for Genesis and Super NES. So, Joe, which one did you say you had?
I had the Super Nintendo.
Okay. I have a Retro 3-in-1 that would work with either of those, but Yeah, Genesis, Super NES, and along with a couple other platforms, PC. I didn't note everything.
32X.
Yeah, 32X. But all in all, depending on price, I think I might want to get my hands on that. But we come back to Jerry the King Lawler interviewing Owen Hart with Jim Cornette at the outside. Next week on Raw, Owen will get his shot at Razor Ramon for the IC title, and I can't help but agree that I really wish this match could have been saved for the pay-per-view. Owen cuts a pretty good promo for us, and I feel the need to add, I have to say I continue to love Owen Hart. So underutilized here. Such a fucking talent, but maybe we're just in one of those downturns where you have to go away in order for me to miss you, as Pritchard likes to say. But let's also take a look back at last night's shenanigans at In Your House 4. This is going to be a way of setting up the Diesel Hitman Championship match at Survivor Series. Also, we're going to have Doc Hendricks here to inform us about the upcoming Survivor Series, and this is the weird-ass match that fan-friendly interim president Gorilla Monsoon has for us. We referenced this in our episode last week for In Your House 4. In that episode, JR had mentioned this, but didn't really get a chance to explain it. They're calling it the wild card match. And on one team, it's Shawn Michaels, Sid, the British Bulldog, and Ahmed Johnson. And on the other team is Dean Douglas, Yokozuna, Owen Hart, and Razor Ramon. The point being, I guess, that we just have a mix of faces and heels, and who knows who might want to support whom here. I can't see how that could possibly go wrong. And wait, what's that out in the crowd there? Wait, hold on. I need to start that over again so I can try my newly found Doc Hendricks impersonation. Wait, what's that out there in the crowd, Vince?
Terrible.
It's Bob Backlund, campaigning for president up in Canada, of course. For the record, I forget who was even counting this, but is this a pro or a con for Backlund?
It's a con. You were counting, so.
Okay. Well, I didn't know who was determining whether it was a pro or a con, but just hold on.
He wanted to stop now that the cons are catching up.
Well, we got to keep this official. Hold on a second. Okay, that's a hash mark there. All right. So score is currently 5-2. All right. So we were lucky in that this was the only shit that we got out of Bob Backlund in this episode, so I'll take it. Next, though, we will go to an Ahmed Johnson promo. And by God, Ahmed Johnson is a big motherfucker. Holy
fucking beast.
I would be I know it's all a work, but I would be terrified being across the ring from this fucking guy. Huge. And he looks like a natural kind of huge. He doesn't look like any kind of roids going on there. I mean, I might be wrong.
Almost like he could have been a Goldberg before Goldberg came around.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dude's fucking enormous.
Yes. It was a pretty decent promo. It was short but sweet, and most importantly, it was better than his previous one. He just had things to say about protecting Shawn Michaels in that wild card Survivor Series match and, talking down to the Bulldog and what have you. So we do have more to come here. But first, Joe, we had a lot going on in between these matches. So tell us, please, what you thought about the promos, that weird Survivor Series match, and, of course, the on-screen return of your favorite superstar, Mr. Bob Backlund.
Yeah, the interview with Owen Hart, I'm still on a high after his win, so I loved this interview. It was him being interviewed by Jerry Lawler, and he was with Jim Cornette, right?
Yes, sir.
They didn't do any goofy shit. It was just a serious promo, like, Razor, I'm coming for you next week. Good job on that. I liked it. The Doc Hendricks Survivor Series report, I guess we'll call it, the Slam Jam, as they were calling it. It's just the wild card to me. Let me borrow a term from James E. Cornette and say lazy booking. It just seems like, okay, we don't really have much going on with these guys, so let's just throw in a fucking wild card and try to get them to turn on each other.
Give them a swerve.
Swerve, yeah. Ahmed Johnson, awesome promo. He made it very clear he's a babyface. He's in Shawn's corner. I like that a lot.
Yeah, the Owen Hart interview, I thought he did a great job, especially just coming off a 20-man battle royale, so he had to be pretty fucking tired, but he had no problem ripping off a pretty good promo here on Razor, and he ends it with his typical little ripping on Bret Hart, taking off his "I'm the best there is, the best there was, and best there ever will be." So good job by Owen, as always. Doc Hendricks. My Lord. I mean, like when we cut to him, he is just like jumping around and just bouncing off the walls like he just inhaled a fucking Scarface level pile of coke. I mean, it was insane how much energy Doc Hendricks had for this little Survivor Series report. But I will say, in agreement with both of you, the Ahmed Johnson promo was really good. Much, much better than his first one that we got. And I'm excited to see what he's got to do because, like you said, he just looks like a fucking monster.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed on all points, and especially on the Owen Hart interview. It's amazing how good something can be when it's kept to the simple basics. How about that shit? All right. Well, I really didn't want to go here with this because I don't, we'll get to it here, I guess. We'll go now to our next match. Avatar defeats Brian Walsh by pinfall in 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And this is the only jobber of the night. Ryan, what do you have to say about that?
So he is the only jobber of the night. However, he will not be the jobber of the week because we already did Brian Walsh back on the September 18th, 1995 episode of Raw that we did. So if you'd like to hear the coverage of Brian Walsh as a jobber in his career, head on back to our September 18th episode and give that a listen.
Thank you, sir. Back into the match. I don't know what the hell the deal with Avatar is. This is Al Snow. But he waited until he was in the center of the ring to put the mask on, and the gimmick indicates that he's some kind of karate master, a Kwang Light, if you will.
A master of martial arts.
Yeah, and he does do some gestures that indicate, or at least attempt to indicate, that he is a martial arts master. But I don't know, like, the weird, just...
It's Power Rangers. It's a weak attempt at
Is that it?
Power Rangers.
Okay.
It has to be. Yeah.
I assumed it was more video game stuff, kind of like how Hakushi was Raiden. I thought this was some other fucking video game guy that we would never figure out, but...
Close.
Yeah, I mean, same difference in the end.
Is Al Snow a martial arts guy? I didn't think he was.
No.
Okay.
No, not to my knowledge, at least. And I am a huge fan, but by no means an expert. And to my knowledge, he is not. The crowd here was dead fucking silent going into this match and through the majority of this match. This was almost depressing watching this. Brian Walsh, just as white as I remember him. The whitest motherfucker to ever grace the ring. At least this time, he didn't have white trunks and white boots on to go along with it, like he did back in the September 18th episode in the archives. Avatar has some stutter steps here. I'm not sure what else to say about it. And not just Avatar. I mean, Brian Walsh did too. There were just some major miscommunications going on here. And as much as I love Al Snow, this was a very cringe-inducing match. That, for me personally, this was almost painful to watch, even though it was so short. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck was going on here. As soon as Avatar gets the pinfall, he removes his mask, and I don't know. Joe, please, what did you think?
Well, the Power Ranger gimmick is the shits. It's not not creative. You're just stealing from something else. Like it's just doesn't make any sense at all. And
it felt very much like, what the fuck was the Sub-Zero guy in WCW?
Oh, Glacier?
Yeah, Glacier. He looked exactly like Sub-Zero.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really not good. And this was a match so that Al Snow could get all of his shit in, and it wasn't good. I mean, that's all there is to it. And a very audible, come on, let's go home at the end. Yeah. Like you said, it was dead silent. And man, just not good. And I had some high hopes. Like I saw the gimmick and I thought, okay, this is bad, but it's Al Snow. We can get a good match, and we did not.
Yeah, in agreement here, and it's a shame because, like you, Bartlett, I've always loved Al Snow. He's just always been such a likable guy in every promotion I've seen him in. So it's a shame to say, but this match just misfired on every level. The timing was off. These two guys just didn't work good together, and unfortunately led to an extremely forgettable debut for Al Snow and Avatar. That's a real shame. The only, I think, decent looking thing he did was at the beginning when he dove out of the ring. That was okay looking and was a high flying move. But outside of that, very lackluster. But as a straight man, though, I got to agree with Lawler here. When he took his mask off, Al Snow, younger, is a very handsome man.
Yeah, why would you put a mask on him?
What's funny about that, since you guys bring it up, and I didn't even really think about it at the time, but you're both absolutely right. And one of the things that makes Al Snow so great later on is his facial expressions, not just his work and the physical way that he sells, but through expression, the way that he sells. Al Snow's ability to look insane, even though he is one of the smartest motherfuckers you'll ever meet, is one of the reasons that he is such a fantastic wrestler, in my opinion. And to just handicap him with the mask. I mean, I guess they probably didn't know that back then, but I don't know. If you're giving a guy a tryout, why are you going to shoot him in the foot before he goes out to the ring? And part of me secretly hoped that this whole mask shit with, him walking out without the mask and then putting it on to start the ring, this secret inner part of me really hoped that that was him kind of doing a fuck you to the man and saying like, all right, I'll put this mask on if you want, but I'm not going to walk in with it and I'm not going to walk out with it.
Sadly, Bartlett, I might bring Al Snow down a notch for you with this, but I was watching some shoot interviews of Al Snow recently, and the question was, who is, in your opinion, the most underrated wrestler of all time? And his answer was Marty Gianetti. And he had nothing but great things to say about the guy. So there you go.
At least he didn't say King Kong Bundy.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm not in a position to argue, but if anybody knows anything about wrestling, I dare say it's Al Snow, and I would also dare say that if Marty Gianetti was that underappreciated, that would probably give him a slight case of maybe depression and some substance abuse. So that seems to fit. That seems to fit.
It does.
Is all I'm going to say. But let's move it along here. Let's go now to wait. What is this? What? It's Barry fucking Didensky, everybody. My
highlight.
Hallelujah.
No need to do highlights and lowlights this week.
Yeah.
Nope.
If there's anybody on the face of this planet that could make me okay with having Bret Hart watch me while I'm sleeping, it's Barry fucking Didensky.
What a roller coaster episode. We go from a shitty Avatar match to Barry fucking Didensky.
Highs and lows.
I mean, I started popping my ass off. There's no holding that back. This was just
He's back.
Phenomenal. Absolutely
coming
phenomenal.
Day and night.
Well, Barry is looking good, and Barry is selling his ass off for us here. Imagine Shawn Michaels in your home. Imagine Bret Hart at your dinner table. It was great. It was great. Because you know what? At no point did Barry fucking Didensky say that either of these guys would be watching you while you sleep.
Exactly. Exactly. Here's someone who actually knows how to fucking sell something.
Doesn't make you feel uncomfortable.
No. He actually says things that you might enjoy.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a kid, could you think of a cooler thing than sitting down at dinner and putting your big cutout of Bret Hart next to you while you eat your fucking peas,
Yep, absolutely. As opposed to, get this in your room with you while you sleep. Do, do, do.
Bret, can you look away? I'm looking at Sonny right now.
Well, from all of us here at Wrasslin Raw, thank you, Barry.
Welcome back.
Fantastic to see you. Absolutely fantastic. I'm on a high just thinking back to it. Amazing. Alundra Blayze. She's busy preparing for her title match with the current women's champion, Bertha Faye. Yet to come, commentary from Shawn Michaels on that 30-man armed forces battle royale he took part in up in Syracuse. Next week on Raw, Goldust will be taking on Savio Vega in his Monday Night Raw debut. And I know we talked about this already, but just briefly, guys, Joe first. Please give me the play-by-play of your thoughts and emotions as you realized that Barry fucking Dudensky was coming out one more time, and also that other shit that happened in this segment.
Just my fucking jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. Barry fucking Dudensky. And like I said, it was nice to see him after that shit show of a match right before it. So that was beautiful. And I mean, the Goldust preview was okay. I'm looking forward to seeing him because the debut match did not go so great. So I'm hoping for some redemption there.
Yeah.
Yeah, just absolutely ecstatic to see Barry fucking Dudensky back. And I really hope that the guy's middle name is fucking because that's all I've referred to him for months now. But it was just great to see the powers of Wrasslin Raw reach into the past again.
Yeah,
yet again. And change it. And change and bring him back. So you're welcome to the rest of the world. Savio Vega versus Goldust? That sounds, Savio Vega's a great wrestler, so I think that this may be a match that will maybe change our minds from our last In Your House match from Goldust's debut. Hopeful, at least.
Yeah, completely agreed on that. I think that Goldust was done a disservice by starting him off with Marty Gianetti. But then again, hey man, whatever. This is all about fresh starts. And as we know, Goldust isn't going anywhere, so I'm very much looking forward to his match with Savio Vega. Barry fucking Dudensky, and I mean, we're all on the same page there. I just want to point out to everybody out there listening that it was theorized and hypothesized through Joe's research into contemporary wrestling news that Barry Dudensky was axed because he was voted as the most deserving of a powerbomb. And let me just tell you, folks, that powerbomb, that set up a false finish, bitches, because Barry's back. He rallied, and I'm happy to see it.
I have to feel that they did fire him, but then Doc Hendricks last week saying, have Bret Hart watch you while you sleep, said, you know what, maybe we need to call Barry back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they realized that Doc Hendricks wasn't going to fill that role.
No. Now, Petting Zoo's role, he could maybe fill.
Yeah, instead, they give him the Slam Jam.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure a piece of inanimate stone could fill Petting Zoo's role. But all right, well, we've delayed long enough, gentlemen. Once again, I regret having to do this to us, but we are going to go now into our final match of the night. Alundra Blayze defeats Bertha Faye with Harvey Whippleman by pinfall in 9 minutes and 35 seconds to win the WWF Women's Championship. This fucking match was a perfect academic example of everything going wrong with the women's division here. I mean, if you want a prime version of the errors being made, here it is. First and foremost, the stark difference, just at the outset of this match, the stark difference between Bertha Faye's Eagles ripoff entrance and Alundra Blayze's badass entrance, it's like night and day. You know, I might be biased, but even just the entrance makes me take Alundra Blayze seriously as a competitor, while Bertha Faye's is just cartoon shit by comparison. And I know that doesn't really seem like much in the grand scheme of things, but we have to keep in mind that part of the reason why the women's division wasn't taking off back then is that nobody took it seriously. And if you're going to have Bertha Faye as your champion coming out with this cartoon bullshit fucking gimmick and entrance, no, nobody's going to take that seriously at all. But you know what? Alundra Blayze, in fantastic shape, working like a fucking professional and coming out to this, again, badass fucking entrance, that made me take her seriously. And it just fucking boggles my mind that you can have the answer to the problem in one hand here with Alundra Blayze and the cause of the problem in the gimmick booking of Bertha Faye on the other hand. So again, you know, just perfect example of what is wrong with the women's division. Moving back into the match here, I get the impression that Bertha Faye, she's just there for the paycheck. I don't have any concrete reason to think that, but her mannerisms, the way that she works, the way that she just barely takes a bump, she just barely sells, I think she's just there to hit the pay window.
Yeah.
Apparently, Bertha misheard a spot call here because after a flip over, Alundra had to literally grab Bertha's ass and pull her down to sit on Alundra as the spot.
Ugly.
Virtually everything Bertha does looks horrible, while everything Alundra does looks fantastic, or at least as fantastic as it can working with Bertha. Alundra, truly a professional. She even sells her heart out to this fucking piece of garbage that is Bertha Faye. More blatant spot calling after that, and it's at this point in my notes that I determined this match is officially a joke to me now, if it wasn't before. But Alundra literally has to tell Bertha to keep coming into the corner. So Bertha whips Alundra to the corner. Alundra does a nice little flip over to go over the top rope and stand in the corner. Then Alundra has to literally gesture, "Come here," to Bertha in order to keep that momentum going and to keep the action happening and to keep that spot happening. You know, it could have been a great looking spot because the way that Alundra started it with the hit into the turnbuckle and then the flip over to land on the apron, perfectly executed. But Bertha's big ass just stood there and watched her. This continues as the referee, oh my God, the referee ends up getting 1 counts. What wrestling matches have 1 counts? Like, I know that's kind of a stupid thing to point out, but Jesus Christ, there are stutter steps galore from everybody. There's nothing but piss poor work from Bertha. And just the icing on the cake here, at one point, Harvey Whippleman is up on the apron holding Alundra Blayze by the hair. And the referee is counting at Harvey instead of calling for the DQ, which a referee would have done in any other fucking match, which a referee did in the fucking championship match at the pay-per-view just last night. So it's not like this is rocket science here. Somebody interferes, you call the DQ. Literally holding her hair to set her up for a hit. Luckily, I guess, that doesn't manifest, and Bertha Faye ends up hitting Harvey Whippleman. Thank Christ, we get to go home from this with Alundra Blayze as the new champion. It is a hollow gesture for a non-existent division, but at least Alundra has the recognition as the only woman in professional wrestling, or at least maybe American professional wrestling at this time, deserving of that title. Such a shit show. My goodness. I think I made my thoughts clear on this in my breakdown. So Ryan, please, what did you think of our women's championship match?
Alundra Blayze is amazing to watch in the ring. Yeah, she's great. Bertha Faye is the exact opposite of that. Just the fact that we ever gave her the belt. I guess, is what's upsetting. So this match had to happen because somehow you have to take the belt off of her. So unfortunately, we have to have this rematch. I forgot all about Bertha's just loud screaming every time that she throws a punch or does anything. That was comical, I guess, at the very least. And I will give Bertha Faye one shred of credit. At the very beginning of the match, she body slams Alundra in a fairly decent looking body slam. It was okay. But she immediately follows that up with just obscene looking belly bumps in the corner that were just terrible. And then from there, Alundra tries to mount an offensive, but who could tell? Because Bertha Faye isn't going to fucking sell a goddamn shred of it. It's sad. It really is sad. We just go back and forth of this very ugly looking women's title match until we get to the very end where Alundra actually does land a pretty good looking, what was like a cartwheel into the corner, head scissors to take Bertha Faye off the top rope. That looked pretty good. And Alundra Blayze's finisher with a German suplex was pretty decent too. So I'll give Bertha a little bit of credit there. She did help Alundra in that suplex because with a woman of Bertha's size, she certainly would need a little assistance to pull off that suplex, and it looked good. But that is about it as far as anything that you could even call a highlight in this match. Yeah, it's great that Alundra has the belt back, but man, what did we have to go through to get there?
I am probably a little biased because the 90s was my peak fandom, but I think Alundra Blayze, Medusa, I think she's the best women's wrestler of all time, in my opinion.
I think there's a strong argument for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed.
She is literally doing shit that nobody else was doing. Like, there's not even anyone that can come in and be a competitor for her. So that just shows how great she was. She just seems like a cool chick. She rides fucking Harleys. She drives monster trucks. She's just one of the guys, You never hear her shoot interviews about her doing stupid shit. So yeah, just professional, very professional and great. And we're not going to see her much longer because we know what happens with her at the end of the year, unfortunately. So it's sad that we couldn't enjoy her last days here in WWF because this is just pathetic. I do think that this match was slightly better than the SummerSlam match, only because the right wrestler won this match. Please tell me this is over and we can just move on from it. I hope we don't get any more of these. Did you guys see at the end when Alundra was leaving, the kid that hugged her, gave her a hug, and then looked like he melted?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see that.
It looked like it just made his day.
I'm sure
which was
it did.
Hilarious, yeah. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Yeah. So if anybody out there has any interest in this, I strongly suggest looking up shoot interviews about Alundra Blayze. She's another one of those people that you might hear something negative said here and there about the way that she handled her transfer to WCW and what she did with the belt. Some of the old school purists were not very happy with the whole throwing the belt in the garbage thing, but the vast majority of what you will hear are people talking about how hard of a worker she was and how tough as fucking nails she was, and that she would give any man a run for his money as far as a straight up just fight. She trained in Japan. She trained everywhere that she possibly could to become the badass that she legitimately is and was. And to see all of that hard work end up in a match like this, it's just, I don't know.
And to kind of defend her move that she does on WCW, I guess I would consider myself somewhat of the old school wrestling way of things, you know what I mean? But as far as I'm concerned with her, the business was not respecting her. So she had every right to throw that fucking belt in the trash because that's where it deserved to be at that point.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I'm glad we are all in agreement on that because it seems like and feels like the way that Alundra Blayze specifically was treated at this time, just one of the bigger travesties of wrestling in the 90s, or at least WWF wrestling. But yeah, great point on that. Why subscribe to the traditional way of thinking if the traditional way of thinking is what brought us to this fucking match?
Yeah.
All right, moving it along. Jim Ross is here, and always great to see good old JR. He's going to have an interview with Shawn Michaels. So let's cut over to them now. And I could have swore Jim Ross was going to have an interview with Shawn Michaels, but he's sitting here with a fucking hobo. And joking aside, this is Shawn Michaels, but this is probably the worst we've ever seen Shawn Michaels. He's there in a sweatshirt and jeans. His hair's messy. He's looking like he just took on the combined forces of G.I. Joe. This was rough to see. I have my own opinions on Shawn Michaels, but this view of him, he was like a visual representation of what rock bottom can be, I guess. I'm not exaggerating with that. He looked like hell, going from somebody that was the Intercontinental Champion and constantly being, nipping at the championship picture and being Vince's, or at least one of Vince's top guys, to this. He looked rough. Shawn cuts a decent, honest promo here. And by honest, I mean I believe that he was truly saying and expressing what was on his mind and what he felt he was going through. He says that he's used to the kind of things that happen to him, and just the asshole part of me assumes that he means that gangs of people beat the shit out of him outside of bars all the time because he has one drink too many and runs his mouth. Shawn continues in this promo to whine about his bad luck and mostly just spends his time bitching about the whole situation. He does finish it up with some positive words about the future and where he hopes to be when he comes back to action. Joe, I wanted to hear from you first on this because you're on record as having Shawn Michaels as one of your all-time top guys. What did you think about this interview and the way that that Shawn presents himself here as the way that Raw ends tonight? Because this is the end of our episode.
Yeah, he looked worse than he did on Sunday. It's like the timeline didn't match up here. So I'm extremely fascinated by how they're handling this whole thing because it's like borderline breaking kayfabe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Shawn saying, he's not very popular right now in the locker room. It's like he's really shooting here. Keep in mind, too, this came off of the Blue Brothers wanting to beat his ass like 3 days before. So it's really interesting to me how they're handling this. Vince is saying that he got beat up by thugs, and then this interview, it's very fascinating to me.
It is. It's very fascinating. And it reminded me a lot of what we will see in the future in the more realistic Attitude Era. And that's kind of what it comes off as. I completely agree. Shawn Michaels looks like a fucking mess. I've never seen him look this bad, but the interview itself did not come off as bad. It just came off as very real and personal. And because of that, an interview that we're not used to seeing at the WWF at this time. So a very interesting interview for sure.
Yeah, you've both made fantastic points with that as far as how real this was. In contrast to, we had Owen Hart earlier that did a great interview, that did a great promo, but that could almost be considered, the definition of a traditional promo interview. Mm-hmm. Then you've got Ahmed Johnson in the middle, and he's doing the traditional babyface thing. He's towing that company line and establishing his character. Also good. We look back at promos and interviews with Jerry Lawler and Isaac Yankim, where they're at a fucking dentist office. And, those are, I guess, more considered vignettes, but they highlight the cartoony aspect of some of the shit going on here in the WWF at this time. And then you get this. we've had various different little hints and touches upon what would become the Attitude Era, Sunny, Goldust. Now this in the almost breaking kayfabe, as you guys put it, style. And you're right. This is absolutely fascinating how this comes across. And like I said in my breakdown of it, this comes across as honest, whereas none of the other stuff does. Even the traditional stuff that is good, it still doesn't come across as honest because, it's a wrestling promo.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, even, warts and all on this, because as I pointed out, Shawn has a bit of a victim complex. He's got a bit of an arrogance problem.
We always hear that Vince saw himself in Shawn Michaels, and there's nobody better at playing victim than Vince McMahon.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just that kind of vulnerability here, I guess, to present himself, flaws and all, that made this as intriguing as it was. And the thing that I personally, the thing that jumped out to me the most was his hints at the Intercontinental title belt being in the hands of somebody that is overrated and doesn't deserve it. This was in reference to him handing it over to Dean Douglas, not Razor Ramon specifically, for the record. So yeah, and getting back to that whole click thing with Dean Douglas, this was a hell of a promo and interview, just for peeking behind the curtain. But like I said, that's it. That's where our episode ends. So let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Ryan, why don't you go first?
Highlights. I don't think this is going to come as any surprise. Barry fucking Dudensky. The man, the myth, the legend is back. Lowlight. I don't know if I'm going to say I'm the only guy out of you two, but I think I'm going to be the only one that says the 20-man Royale.
Huh, yeah.
They're just my least favorite matches of all time. And yes, the last couple minutes were entertaining, but we had 18 minutes of filler to finally get to the meat. So that's my lowlight.
Yeah, highlight, definitely Barry fucking Dudensky. How could it not be? Low light for me is, I could easily say the Big Bertha versus Alundra Blayze, but Alundra Blayze won, so I'm not going to say that. I will say the disappointment of Al Snow's debut as Avatar and the botches and just the shit match that it was.
Yeah, all valid. Absolutely valid. My highlight, obviously, Barry fucking Dudensky. No question about that whatsoever. Next Christmas, I think I'm going to look into getting us all autographed pictures of him.
That should be cheap.
Well, I don't know. He might have, depending on how much success he had on the poker junket.
He might throw in a classic video, too.
Yeah. I call it Barry's greatest hits on Coliseum Home Video.
Yeah.
Autographed.
On a cassette, according to Vince.
Low light for me is going to have to be the Alundra Blayze Bertha Faye match. While you do make a great point, Joe, in that Alundra did win, still just entirely representative of the problem of women's wrestling in the early 90s, and also entirely representative of the way they could have fixed it. And because they didn't fix it, they robbed us of literally decades of what could have been good women's wrestling as a result. So that's it for me. Joseph, do you happen to have any kind of contemporary wrestling news from on and around October 23rd, 1995 for us?
Yes, I have a couple of news items on the recent events with The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. The Undertaker had his surgery about 2 weeks ago, and Dave Meltzer reports that his eye had to be moved 1/4 of an inch in the surgery with an implant put under the bone to push it back into its correct place. So, that sounds
Mabel.
brutal. The Shawn Michaels situation, the police report reported that there were 45 men that put no.
An entire platoon.
There were 10 men who attacked Shawn Michaels.
10.
And the police report also states that Shawn Michaels was passed out in the front seat of the car when he was pulled out of the car. So
That's a tidbit of info we haven't heard yet.
I think the police may have pulled their information from a drunk Sean Waltman, possibly.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
He was just passed out in the sea.
I just got done singing him a lullaby.
As far as some comments from the Observer on tonight's Raw, Dave Meltzer, like me, he enjoyed the Battle Royal. He thought it was really good and gave it 3.5 stars. Avatar debuted and it was terrible and had no fan reaction. Walsh looked lost, and I've never seen snow blow so many spots.
Blow.
He was a little shocked by that as well. And Meltzer's comments on the Alundra Blayze versus Bertha Faye, he said, if you get past the fact that Alundra Blayze and Bertha Faye, the feud itself is a disaster, and Faye is usually awful, this was kind of good, and gave it 2.5 stars.
2.5. All right.
And that is all.
Well, I guess... Joe, let me ask you, in your Wrasslin research there with Meltzer's Wrestling Observer, how often does Dave specifically talk about individual episodes of Raw?
It's tough because a lot of times, because of the way that Raw is 4 shows at a time, I try not to read too much of it because he puts it all in one area. So it's not very often that he'll give the matches his star ratings. He does that very rarely.
Okay.
But he does recap every single Raw episode, basically, within the Observer.
Okay.
But mostly just no different from what we do. You know, he just says what happened in the match, and that's it.
Okay. You mentioned there in your news segment that he specifically comments on this Raw, and it got me thinking that more often than not, the news segments are peripheral news, like what's going on in the background kind of thing that we don't, as viewers in the 1995, we wouldn't have a view of. And it just kind of made me realize that he just really doesn't all that often talk about individual matches, and I didn't know.
Yeah, when I see that, I try to include it for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not too often.
For the record, for our listeners out there and for the both of you, I have learned more about Meltzer and Meltzer's reporting from you, Joe, than I have in my entire life.
Absolutely.
From both wrestling and shoot interviews. So keep it coming. It is fantastic to get that little peek behind the scenes.
Though from the shoot interviews, I have learned that most wrestlers absolutely despise Dave Meltzer. So.
And he was kind of wrong on Barry fucking Dudinsky, too.
Yeah,
so
he was.
It's not always accurate.
Yeah, fuck him for that. We'll leave it at that.
Barry just wanted a fucking vacation, and he said he was fired.
Jeez. We can all hope that the three of us end up drinking in Vegas and playing cards with Barry fucking Dudinsky sometime before we die.
Shit, I don't know. It sounds like he's a professional poker player. I don't want to fucking play cards with him.
Yeah, really.
Well, you play with him, not against him. That's the thing.
Okay.
The most important part is showing up to the casino to get the free drinks.
Exactly.
And that's it, folks. We're done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. And if you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can find us on every major social media and podcast subscription platform by searching up the handle Wrasslin Raw. That's WRASSLINRAW. While you're there, don't forget to click subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know about the fastest growing wrestling podcast in the world. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on October 30th, 1995, with matches featuring John Reckner, Goldust, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.